Recently, I have been watching a stream by a Warhammer YouTuber that has really caught my attention. He does pretty awesome work in making the 40k universe interesting and thought-provoking, but no, this isn't my debut into that universe as much as I would love to try to make content for it. I find a lot of the sci-fi content in there to be very interesting from a technical perspective, as well as world building wise. And for a few weeks before this, I had actually been building a video notes file for a video on hive cities and the population of the Imperium, but I had to drop it. Not because I don't love Warhammer, although I'm not an avid reader of the books. I love their games and people's lore content about it, but because I think that GW, the owners of the company, are a predatory company looking to greedily eliminate any competition, and I don't want to get caught up in any of their bullcrap, even at my very, very modest size. No, the reason I wanted to make this video was to talk about the content that he was making a video about, which is a game called Alien Isolation, or rather a part of it that I found very interesting after looking at it in the context of a new TV series. And no, once again, before I offend any of the fans of the old series of movies, I don't like the new show. I think it's a bad show that destroys all the lore continuity, and I think that some of the latest movies have been doing that as well, to a much lesser degree, but that is a separate issue. No, the thing from the Alien series that I actually want to talk about isn't the aliens themselves, or the corporate chicanery going on in it, but an aspect of the world building, which is really my favorite topic in every universe I get involved with. The computer systems they have on their ships. How is this a relevant topic, or an interesting topic for a Command & Conquer YouTuber to talk about? Have I lost all interest in CNC, seeing how long it's been since I have made a video on the topic, or in general? Well, let me tell you something. No, I am still a fan of CNC. I still enjoy playing the games and talking about the lore and writing about it, and I still have fun with all of that, but I have to admit, not to the same degree I did years ago when I started this channel. This channel was originally started in, I think, 2017, when I came back from school after getting sick, and it was started because I didn't see anyone else doing lore on franchise that I, at the time, spent a great deal of my time playing and talking about. My technical abilities were absolutely terrible, and the writing ability was pretty crap too, so it didn't go the way I wanted, but I had a ton of enthusiasm for the topic, so much so that I annoyed the crap out of my family and friends talking about it so much. And the sad thing is that in the last year and a half, I haven't really been like that. I've had to put a lot more effort into writing for the videos and engaging the community in the topic, not for a lack of love of the topic, but I think that as time goes by, as I have been able to afford more games and I've been working full time, I notice that I've been spending much more of my time on games that I have developed an equal interest in, like EU4, but has no lore to talk about. And so I've been simply doing much less of that sort of talking and discussing than I'd really like to be. Anyway, that is to say that I might not be as active in posting CNC stuff. I still will. I just still plan on doing all of the Red Alert or videos on the timeline and that I talked about before and all that stuff, but I don't really want to feel bound to the one topic the way it has been feeling for a while. Before I get to the topic of the video, however, I want to reiterate something with new and old viewers, something that I feel like my channel has been struggling with for a while. I am not a lore channel per se, but I have a lot of respect for other creators, shout out in particular to Eckhart's Ladder, Arch, Warhammer, and Jethild. I recommend you check them all out, but I am just a bit autistic, and I like doing deep dives into peculiar topics that intrigue me in the moment, like the ion cannon and iron curtain technologies, or how the oceans in CNC survived the Tib infestation between the first and third games. I love making those videos, and I find the topic very interesting, despite how little people watched it, and going into details about vehicles' autoloaders, or how the ion curtain works, which is a video I want to talk about in the future, This is just something that's going to be part of how my videos work going forward, regardless of the success or not of the channel. I will be the autistic world-building fan to the end, hence the topic of the video. This video will be the re-debut of the channel, and I will try to get more videos out soon. This first part will also be chopped off and uploaded on its own, and so will the main content of the lore part of the video for ease of watching, but I thought I would just get this out there for everyone. I also intend to release a video informing people just what has been going on with me in the background, as I feel like I have been saying I would make a stream or a video about that for a while and I haven't. Oops. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into the lore. When I first watched the Alien movies when I was 7 or 8, with my dad when my mom was out, really shouldn't have been watching them, I did really notice the computer systems at all. I mean, what an obvious statement to start off with. I was 7 or 8. Why would I notice them at all? My father ran a computer mini shop for small companies, so I grew up with DOS-era computers that he would sell on the cheap to companies that needed him. Nothing that I watched on the small screen that we had at the time was all that surprising, but recently I watched the first movie with my sister, and I started noticing some of the details again, and I thought it was interesting. And watching the live stream Arch did recently about the Alien Isolation games really got me interested in the topic. Why would a ultra-advanced future humanity use what amounts to MS-DOS in their computer systems? With the distance between today and the events of the first movie, it really doesn't make very much sense. Our computer systems today and theirs are worlds apart. The obvious answer is that when the movie first came out in 1979, computers were still in a pretty primitive state. And no one really knew what the future of hardware or operating systems would look like because nothing like that had been done yet. MS-DOS had yet to be released, as it would come out in 1981 and wouldn't be standard on many computers for a while after that. Windows 1.0 introduced the first GUI system for their company, and Windows 95 was the first dedicated OS like we know today, and that came out decades after the first movie. The gap in technology and computational power between those dates is staggering. The Motorola 68000, a high-end workstation from 1979, ran at 8 MHz, while the Intel Pentium commonly ran at 133 MHz. And while the level of complexity between the two was night and day, say nothing of the difference between the Pentium and the multi-core computational beasts that are around today. So really, at the time, there was two things working against the world building of the movies, and those were that nothing existed like a modern OS or computer at the time, so there wasn't any reference point as to how they would paint something that would be accurate decades later, and that even if they had done that, their computers couldn't display what we do on our computers commonly now, even if they wanted to. Simple answer to my question about them using this technology is the hardware and imagination limitations at the time prevented them from using something that would seem more realistic for people in universe who use artificial gravity and suspended animation on their ships. But, as I might hear you say from behind my keyboard, you are missing the point. Isn't it is what it is? Is there any reason to even ask this question? Well, besides just, being autistic and wanting to know the answer in the universe, that question got me wondering what sorts of systems are used today in spacecraft, and the answer might surprise you. Basically, I asked a computer friend of mine what would happen if my modern computer would be transported back in time to the Apollo program, and he said something interesting. At the time, computer technology was very limited, and we hear all the time that the entire Apollo program, a program that ran off computers that fit in gigantic rooms and filled warehouses, could have been run off a common smartphone. So you'd think that the tech of the time would have posed an issue with the program, both on the ground and in space, but although there was adaptation that was needed, a lot of their tech was also actually a lot better hardened for the rigors of void travel, the radiation and G-forces than anything we have today. In fact, most of the tech used on the spacecraft and space habitats today is actually older tech that has proven performance and specifically built to handle the radiation that exists in space. If we were to put my gaming PC in space, it would have tons of stability issues and wouldn't do the job as well as older hardware despite being more powerful. As an example, do any of you build your own computers? I'm a hobbyist who has built PCs for myself and other people, and in my PC building journey, I have recently had trouble with getting my DDR5 RAM to run at the advertised speeds. Hold on, I'm telling you this is relevant. So, this is especially true when you are running your RAM in all 4 slots. It is hard to get the computer to be stable at top speeds on DDR5 RAM due to many factors, but a big one is that the high frequency of the RAM causes electromagnetic interference, basically electromagnetic fields within it that changes the way the RAM behaves on the micro level that can cause issues that lead to blue screens of death, which is a common issue for someone who tinkers with their PC. Well, just imagine this. You are on a rocket flying into outer space from Earth. You have to pass through the Van Allen belts around Earth and go into orbital space where the craft is subjected to intense bursts of radiation. Radiation being bursts of electromagnetic energy. And not only are you affected by it, but so is your computers that you're relying on. If my computer has enough trouble running at the speeds that are common for the components, what if it was hit suddenly with gamma radiation? The instability this would cause it to shut down the system, causing the ship to crash or worse, get stuck in space without any way of getting it or the people inside back to Earth. Basically, this is the first bit of reasoning that I will use to suggest that the technology in those movies' universes is built in that way because of the hardware constraints of deep space, extreme duration and conditioned journeys that the spacecraft have to go through. Simpler systems, especially MS-DOS-like systems, are easier to harden and simpler to replace, both in a production and maintenance sense, making them ideal for journeys that Ripley and others have to go on. Hardened systems that are less complex handle extreme changes in temperature, fluctuations of radiation much better than today's tech, and require a much smaller amount of power compared to systems that are in use today. The less complex they are, the less power running through them, the more durable they are, which is incredibly important in excursions that last minimum months to years to decades at a time, where resupply if things go wrong is a very distant concept, often quite literally. The less complex the part, the more and easier it is to manufacture and replace. The more cheaply redundancy can be achieved, and the easier it is to prove these systems out. In addition, the lowered complexity of these systems is actually more vital than one might think at first blush. Modern programs like Borderlands 4, for instance, are incredibly complex programs that have non-deterministic behavior that makes them incredibly difficult to debug and fix when something goes wrong. And that is nothing compared to the level of difficulty when it comes to something wrong with your OS. Another computer nerd example for this is the instability in the 13th gen and 14th gen CPUs based on some flaws within early batches and a lot of butchered microcode that runs on the CPUs themselves. Basically, this microcode would cause overheating and overvoltage, which would cause blue screens and permanent damage to the CPUs and sometimes even the entire computer. And it took multiple generations of these devices to get to the point where the culprit for these issues was found and resolved. The gargantuan complexity of these devices and programs makes finding issues intensely difficult. And the ones, like in Alien, based off of systems like DOS, are exactly opposite. Programs in DOS-like systems are deterministic, where they are deliberately designed to react in a certain way every time something happens, so that when something goes wrong, it's easy to debug and correct the issue. Additionally, these systems are a lot easier for programs like Mother AI to run, debugging parts of the ship automatically without human involvement, which is critical when the journey takes decades and all the humans might be in cryosleep. One of the critical things needed in these long journeys is for every piece of the spacecraft to be redundant, reliable, durable, and last long enough for any issues to survive the decades-long transit time without any human involvement. And let me tell you, today's tech cannot last long enough for these sort of issues to be resolved in that amount of time. Running every day, 24 hours a day, running just with the background tasks of an idle computer, let alone gaming or running complex programs, my CPU might last 8-10 years before needing to be replaced. And the OS will 100% require constant monitoring for issues that accumulate the longer it is on, as the components and programs generate small errors as time goes by. By using deterministic hardware and software, these issues are orders of magnitude easier to repair and cause the parts to last as long as they are needed in the movies. Imagine this car example. In an old car, circa 1980s or before fuel injection and computer monitoring, a car was fairly easy to work on. If you had trouble slowing down, there was a problem with brakes. If you had trouble accelerating, the issue was likely in the carburetor. Introducing the fuel injection, for the most part, had the fuel-air mixture balanced in the car, used a computer to tell it what ratio to add. And from there, more sensors, more computers, more electrical components were added to give that system more information. Then brakes became automatic in some cars, and now some are even self-driving. You might not know this if you aren't someone who fixes cars themselves, but the art of working on cars as a hobby is becoming vastly more difficult as time goes by and much more expensive. Whereas before you could listen to the sound a car made when braking and hear what the issue is, now you need to break out a $1,000 computer to diagnose the other $1,000 computer in your car to get even an inkling of the issue. These issues have led to more complex repairs, more money at the repair shops, and more individual fail points. The right and ability to repair these devices is getting destroyed by increasing complexity demanded by consumers and regulators. In this analogy, the simple pre-1980 carburetor cars are the ships and systems in the Alien franchise, with bells and whistles added, but all regulated by extremely streamlined and proven hardware and systems that make the journeys on-screen possible. And some of the longest-lived cars on the road right now are cars that are much more simple to maintain and run, rather than the new, more expensive ways to make and run cars. This is critical because these pieces of infrastructure, these ships, need to last for decades at a time, or more likely, these ships are still going to be in service hundreds of years in the future. The more expensive it is to run and maintain these crafts, the less viable they are for economic activity, and that's just another minor example of why they might have been designed that way. Now, the mother AI is another issue, as it is much more complex than the rest of the ship's systems, running most of everything, including the reactor by itself, and showing a rudimentary form of decision-making like our AI of today, but far more refined. The mother AI is a computer system that is a work of art, on hardware that is perfected in its reliability and performance. Systems designed based on decades of single-minded research in making the most effective, expressly defined computer system available. It is able to perform a very wide array of tasks, but is not a sentient AI like HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and is much less complex and computationally powerful than something like ChatGPT or Grok. It is a perfect master at doing the set of things that it's given responsibility over, and that is a faithful representation of the idea I am laying out. I imagine that the systems that one uses on the Prometheus are the way they are in the movie, due to it being a ship that the CEO of Weyland-Yutani himself was riding on, before the heyday of interplanetary travel and commerce, before designs had really been proven and made standardized and commercially available to entrepreneurs and companies of many different sizes. I also think that anyone on planet probably enjoys much more complex systems, similar to today's computers, for their own use, not just in space. Although I also guess that the stuff used on colony worlds is probably the same level of rigidly defined and computationally limited computer systems like you might find on chips. Alright, here at the end, let me say that I love things like this. Getting these questions that seem to take a universe that I love and making them seem less interesting, looking into those things a little further, and finding out that a potential plot hole that I had thought I had found was actually a brilliant design choice that further cemented the incredible legacy of the thing that I like. Maybe there is a future where there is more Alien Universe videos that I do. Probably, even. The juxtaposition between the Weyland-Yutani droids versus the ones in isolation are interesting, and I wonder what the reasoning for why the ones in isolation were deliberately programmed like that versus the human-like ones made by Weyland-Yutani. I imagine that would be pretty interesting to write about. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I will try to get another video out soon on another topic. This one has just been burning a hole in my pocket for a while, so it was just what I needed to get back into the swing of things, hopefully. You guys are great, and I can't thank you enough for listening and to my rambling. Have a good day.